Hello there, everyone. It's Adam Rogers here. It's October 1st, 2024, and I wanted to do a little piece tonight on a book that I just finished. Really good, well written book by former British Prime Minister Tony Blair called On Leadership, and appropriately titled. For somebody that's thought a lot about leadership during his time in office, three successive majority governments in the UK, very unusual. I think it's the only time Labour's ever done so. And then someone who's had a very successful career post politics, I think nearly 20 years since he's been prime minister. So it was a really good book, and what I wanted to take from it, and there's many good pieces to the book, advice for leaders, prospective leaders, certain policy issues and such. But what I wanted to talk about is foreign policy, and it's actually a bit of advice in the book is that elected politicians and leaders especially come into office often thinking of domestic policy and things they want to change on the domestic side, but then particularly for a prime minister or the leader of a government, you end up spending much of your time in office dealing with foreign policy and international organizations, international or cross-border at least issues. So I take an interest in international issues, and so I was reading the section that Tony Blair wrote on international affairs, current affairs, and his sort of predictions into the future from a Canadian perspective, and have some thoughts on that. So the book is actually not a particularly long book. It's just over 200 pages. Compare that to his earlier book, which I also read, A Journey. His autobiography was 3 or 4 times that long at least. Really well done, and I was really eager to see read this book when it came out. Tony Blair had a really successful time as prime minister, although it's a mixed legacy, which I'll come to back in a second. His time in office came sort of towards the end of Bill Clinton's time as president in the U.S., and in both cases they had embraced and embodied what they'd call a third way, or sort of triangulation of issues, taking from the left and from the right, and sort of co-opting issues in a way to bring people on side. Really, it was a complicated or a nuanced way of describing themselves as centrist parties, which they were at the time, and kind of cool, progressive politicians in a sense too. Bill Clinton was playing the sax on Arsenio Hall. Tony Blair was in a rock band before he was a politician, and continued to play the guitar, he said, every day while he was in politics still. So interesting guy. Went into the 10 Downing Street with a young family, and so really interesting career. I always like reading books by political leaders, autobiographies particularly. It's nice to see biographies, but from their perspective, and gives, I think, somebody who's aspiring to be in politics an inside view, sort of behind the curtain view of what it's like to be in their shoes. So I've read books by Tony Blair, Bill Clinton, Obama, Winston Churchill, Sir John A., Pierre Trudeau, and go way back, Marcus Aurelius and the Meditations. So there's lots that you can gain from reading what leaders do, how they think, how they organize their governments. But specifically what I wanted to talk about was foreign policy. So what Blair is talking about, I'm going to read a little excerpt from his chapter on that. He says he's talking about China and the U.S. and and the emerging superpower of India, where that all fits, and where neutral countries, he calls them, like Canada, like the UK as well, but like Canada, smaller countries sort of on the periphery of these great powers, what they should be doing and what they should be thinking about. So he says this: a full-scale war, mid-20th century in nature, between two competing conventional armies with hundreds of thousands of casualties right on the border of the European Union was unthinkable a few years ago. Now it is a reality. The aggressor is a United Nations Security Council permanent member, Russia, of course. It has been supported in the aggression by China, which has become much more assertive or aggressive, depending on your viewpoint. And through the conflict, a new alliance has sprung into being between Russia and Iran, and then, even more bizarrely, between Russia and North Korea. So perceptibly and unmistakably a club has been formed: China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. It is a club without a long waiting list, but it nevertheless includes 2 nuclear powers and 2 aspirant nuclear powers, the world's second largest economy and largest country by landmass, one Islamic republic, and the world's most isolated and unpredictable dictatorship. It is not a club of equals, and it is not one in which the Chinese will want to be parked in. China is much more powerful, more sophisticated, and far-sighted than the other members of its current circle, and even though it proclaims that the alliance with Russia is without limits, it will in reality make those limits very clear, albeit privately. And so he describes how China's current position, he says, leads to a paradox in Western policy. China and America are in competition, and America sees China as its biggest threat, but it also believes, as do the rest of us, even if it is, he describes, an unspoken belief, that China alone of the club members can be expected to have a significant interest in stability and a significant aversion to unpredictability. So I think that's a really interesting point. So we're going to see the issue of these countries, China on the one hand, aggressive and a competitor, on the other hand, interested in stability. So where does that place people? Well, you have the USA on one side and China on the other, and then Blair describes India as the emerging superpower because they're going to have the most people in the world, 1.5 billion people before long. China's population is going to be shrinking below 1 billion, and the USA is 350 million or so. So these 3 poles, and he describes it as India being wooed by the other 2 to see which way it's going to go. And so he thinks, Tony Blair that is, thinks that other countries, and I would include Canada in this, would be forced to adopt their own strategies in relation to this, depending on where you are in the world geographically, but also where you are ideologically. And of course, we're as close a neighbor and democracy a democratic ally to the U.S. as there could be. So I think it's pretty clear where we stand. So it says Western nations will have to build up defense capabilities, and in particular developments in tech, especially drones and cybersecurity. So it'll be interesting, right? In wars in the future, we're seeing, of course, human casualties, but I think in the future we're going to see a lot more of this drone warfare that we're seeing in the Ukraine-Russia war, where it'll be a competition back and forth to see which drones are more sophisticated and which can be used in the course of war more effectively. And so I think you'll see in the future, and not so distant future, much more warfare between, even perhaps between major powers, but not involving humans or human casualties. So Blair says that it is crucial that the United States, supported by its allies, maintain technological superiority vis-a-vis China, and that cannot be given up or ceded, and that's going to be difficult because, of course, China is a technological leader in the world. Blair says that leading countries are going to have to give more support for developing countries, and I think to prevent the instability that can come from huge waves of migrants, undocumented, or refugees coming from other countries to the United States and Canada and Europe is seeing this more than we are even. So I think from Canadian perspective, it's going to mean Central and South America and looking after sort of our own hemisphere, our own backyard in a bigger way. I traveled to South America before I was in law school over 20 years ago, and it was, especially if you look at places like Venezuela and Colombia in the northern side, there weren't huge waves of migrants leaving those countries because things were improving. The economy was doing better. Things were on the way up. Now things are very bleak, and people are leaving by the hundreds of thousands. And so that's an issue. But if things were better and supported by Western countries like Canada, then those migrants are more likely to stay in their home countries, and so that's going to have to be an increasing priority. Blair thinks that trade will be a weapon of choice. I think this is particularly true with China. So, you less likely to want to engage in direct warfare because their economy, most countries' first or second largest trading partner is China, and so, China's not going to want to disrupt all of that through open warfare, but that gives them also many levers back and forth now as trade goes to use trade as a weapon for sanctions or tariffs on goods, and we're seeing a fair amount of that now. Blair also says that global cooperation on such global issues as climate change, health issues, that's going to be trickier as time goes on with large countries in more open competition, less open about sharing information, secrets, trade secrets, technology, then these global issues may become more difficult as time goes on. So it's certainly going to be a more complex and sophisticated foreign policy for Canada. There's always lots of complicated things anyway. Blair describes, he said, back in the old days, your foreign minister would be, flying on planes to go to events and dinners and such, and it was sort of a view from 30,000 feet. Now it's very on the ground, detailed, and much more, much more in person and much more hands-on job for foreign ministers, and more involvement on the part of the president, the prime minister, the leader of each country. So it'll need more time from each leader. So I think that's an important thing for aspiring politicians and aspiring government in Canada to start thinking about. I know that the Conservative Party's put their minds to this and thinks about foreign issues a lot. I certainly do, and this book from Tony Blair was a very good. It's an interesting way. It's just he's such an insightful person that everything he says makes an impact on you, and this was nice and a good way to think of. You're reading his thoughts, but then you can also sort of extrapolate from them. Well, what could Canada be doing under these circumstances? So. Lots of interesting details in there, and something to think about as we think about forming the next government in this country and doing some more good in the world. We've certainly seen in the last 8 years, Canada, our reputation in the world has not been enhanced, and I think it's time to bring back some respect to what we do as a country in the world, the effect that we can have on the world, not going around with, the socks and the costumes and that sort of thing, but going around with serious policy, a beefed up military that can actually do some good in the world and make a contribution, assist our main ally, the United States, as they, engage in this battle of the superpowers. And it's going to be a big time in the next few decades as this unfolds, and the next few years as it unfolds. It's happening all the time. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today with you. Is the book. It was really good. I may bring some other excerpts of it out and think about ways that might be used for the good of Canada and the good of all of us. So hope you enjoyed some of those thoughts, and we'll see you next time.